and you should see a message has just popped up on the screen with a red dot in the top right hand corner just to let you know that we are recording. Okay, so welcome to this webinar. It's part of the Learning Futures program and part of our CPD offer, so I'm delighted that you can join us today. We're fortunate to be joined by a great speaker today, and I'm going to introduce that speaker in a second, but before we do, just a couple of housekeeping things to start with. I think for most people, if not everyone, then you've been able to sort out any of the equipment settings that you need. So at the top of the screen, you can adjust the volume. If it's a little bit quiet, then please do. Wonderful, thank you, Jenny, for confirming that. So please do change the volume of your speaker at the top of the screen. You can make that setting, but also you'll notice next to that speaker icon at the top, there is the icon of a raised hand. And if you click on the drop down arrow at next to the person with the raised hand at the top, you see there's all sorts of different statuses that you can use. So you might agree with something that our speaker says. You might ask that the louder, softer, speed up, slow down. You might wish to show laughter, and you might wish to applaud as well. So if you do use those, Kerry, thank you for applauding. That's lovely. So you can see that you can turn those on, and it shows up next to the person's name in the participant list. Once you've done that status, don't forget at the bottom of that list is just to clear the status again, and that will pop your hand down or stop the applause or laughter. So wonderful. Just to say in the webinar, if for any reason you have any connection issue and you get suddenly your internet stops and the webinar ceases for you, if you just come back into your browser and click on the same link that you got into the meeting, then that will bring you back into where we are. And the fact that we're recording this, you'll be able to access that recording at any time following today, so you won't miss anything from there. But just come back into the room if you find your connection goes. If my connection goes, what I'm going to ask you to do is just to hold fire, just stay where you are. So you'll see under the hosts in the top right hand corner, there's two hosts in there at the moment. The one Learning Futures is myself, Rob Martin. If I drop out of the meeting, if there's any connection issue, if you can just hang fire, it will take about 30 seconds for me to come back in if that was the case. It shouldn't happen, but if it does, just stay where you are and we will come back to you as quickly as we can. If you find that you're there and nothing's happening, you can't hear anything and the slides aren't moving forward, then at some point you're going to need to say, okay, it looks like everything's gone down, and you might want to just try to come back into the room. Okay. You've all very kindly used the on-screen chat. As we go through today's webinar, please feel free to use that. If you've got questions, if there's a comment that you wish to make, then just use the chat area in the bottom right-hand corner. We're going to keep the microphones off apart from the presenters. So the chat will be how you post any sort of comment or message or question. And at the end of our speaker's input, then there'll be a time to answer some of those questions and pick those up as well. We're also going to extend that conversation into the Learning Futures website. So through the blog posts on that website, if you've got something that you want to follow on in terms of that discussion, then we'll continue on that website as well, that we'll be able to share that with everybody else. What I'd like to do now is to introduce you to today's speaker. So I'm delighted to be able to introduce Urmila Rasan, who's the Deputy Principal at Stanmore College. And Urmila has very kindly agreed to share her thoughts with regards to looking at governance and leadership with learning technologies, but also some of the effective approaches that they're putting in place at Stanmore College. You can see myself there, Rob Martin. I'm going to be in the background, but what I'd like to do now is just to hand over to Urmila. So I'm just going to load her slides. And Urmila, if you just, whilst I'm doing that, just like to introduce yourself so people can hear you.
Okay, good afternoon. I hope everybody can. I'm Urmila Rasan. I am the Deputy Principal at Stanmore College. I look after the central services, the corporate side. I work with the board. I'm a senior post holder, so I tend to do corporate governance and the leadership part as well. So I look after the IT, MIS, and all that area, so I'm able to contribute to this discussion. So if I get stuck into the slides then, the areas that I'm hoping to cover today, I will try and use real examples wherever I can when I get to the house section of the areas. That's the fourth bullet point. I would like to start by contextualizing what digital transformation is by giving you a few points in each of these areas, and I'll start with the why question. If I start it at the global context, the University of Oxford has commissioned a research on future of innovation and employment. It makes a very good read. I have like to share a few salient points with you. These slides will be made available to you so you can read them at your leisure because there is quite a lot on these slides. I have highlighted a few words which I want you to focus for now because those are those slides stand out, those words stand out. Jobs at risk of computerization will in turn lead to higher productivity, and it always does because it does everything faster. And if we are to close the skills gap, not only do we have to upskill the workforce of the future, we also need to upskill the existing workforce. And to harness this productivity, we need to get the skills gap going, and then the economic growth will follow with more jobs and prosperity. And FE is expected to be the vehicle to achieve this bridging of the skills gap, and you can see it on the graph, the way I have presented it. Then the budgets are tight, all of us know that. Most of the colleges and private providers, work-based learning providers all struggle for money. More is being asked for less. So to succeed in delivering the skills, we need to be able to deliver the skills at an affordable price. The same way the productivity of the world of work is increasing, we need to increase it among our teachers. So computerization in the form of using learning technologies need to reach the teachers to raise the productivity, not only to upscale. To deliver the high quality education, we also need to understand the world of work. If we don't know what the world of work is looking for, we cannot do the training. This will enable us to turn the future workforce suitably trained, which will include the familiarity with digital technology. The young learners and the working age population are all using digital technology in their day-to-day life and will expect it in their learning environment. And that's the new normal we have now. I have mentioned crowdfunding at the bottom of that slide there. This is where the apps are developed, and we all know the app economy. All of us are used to it. Like to just mention it in case you haven't heard of what crowdfunding is. It is a practice of funding for a project or a venture where money is raised with large number of people via the internet so that they can invest, not through a bank. So that was the global context. Now let's look at the UK's digital future and the need to be competitive in the global context. There was a debate at the House of Lords. I'm sure all of you would have read the report. The report starts off by saying, this report is of call to action for the incoming government of May 2015. So whichever party comes into power, it needs to be delivered. And one of the objectives in the report is to turn a world-leading further education system for digital skills brought about by a comprehensive employer-led review of the further education offer. And when I say further education, that includes all FE offer, the work-based learners, the apprenticeship, the community learners, and colleges. To deliver these objectives, we need to be ready. So that's where we start off. So where do we go from here, now that we know what is expected of us? To deliver the objective of being a world-leading further education system, you could see those words I have highlighted. We have to revamp our offer and the teaching mechanisms, move up a gear of qualifications, being taught to include digital elements in all our courses. To deliver this, we need the infrastructure in place and the workforce ready. And that's where leadership and governance comes in, really. Because if it's organizing your curriculum, that can be done. But leadership and governance need to support, to underpin that infrastructure to be put in place to deliver the workforce. Okay, now let's look at the who. So, the who question. Who are our stakeholders in this context? Who is going to impact the most? So if you look at each of these groups, I like to go through each of these groups and how it's going to impact on them, and then I can talk about the how to do it. So if you start with learners and employers, the employers want and how best the learners learn. We need to know that. This is using technology. Instant feedback and anytime, any place learning is what is happening. In at the workplace, we do part-time. We don't always go into work these days. We work from home. We work from different places, and kids study from different places. Youngsters study from different places. We know they all got mobile technology. Whether it is young getting ready for the world of work or the existing workforce being upskilled, getting ready to move into new jobs where the hollowing out process is taking place, all the new jobs will involve digital technology. Everybody needs to learn it and use it. Short, flexible courses are the answer to the workforce being upskilled. Young learners and apprentices, inclusion of digital elements into their learning. All need digital education, whatever age they are. Then I want to talk about the T-shaped workforce, T-shaped education that is being asked by the employers. If there are ongoing changes to the jobs, we need to deliver education so that the learners can move into those new changing environments throughout their lives. So depth in skills and breadth for adaptability is what is being looked at. And the new curriculum introduced by the vocational curriculums which are being introduced are mostly that. They're all T-shaped. It has got a breadth and the depth. Future-proofing the young learners and the young workforce is essential for the next 20 to 30 years. The ability to move across the different world of work, artisanal to digital, everyone will be using technology. Even the artisanal world will be using technology because the apps economy is here. Most of the trading is being done on the internet. World of work is going to be different more now than more than 20 years ago and will be in the future. Workers of today and tomorrow are expected to change jobs many more times than the workers of the past. Digital skills they develop are expected not only to secure their jobs, but also to help in their daily lives. Automation. Automation of jobs in the world of work has led to many job losses. This has resulted in the job profile that is in an hourglass shape, resulting in the polarization of skilled and non-skilled jobs. Skilled jobs have a better progression route, higher volume of jobs are being available, and this polarization and the hourglass shape it will continue over the next 20 years. Okay, let's see, how am I doing for time? Okay, right, so who is our next stakeholder? They are our teachers. So we know what the learners and employers want. Now let's focus on the teachers. We need to raise the capacity to deliver learning fit for purpose and efficiency to manage resources. And teachers is our biggest resource in any form of education. The further education workforce strategy, the government strategy to support the workforce excellence, in which the ABIS released that document, it lists 4 priorities, and I have listed them there. I like to focus on the priority 3 and 4, because 1 and 2, the 2 I more or less covered earlier. 1 is about teacher training, where the improvements are being made in teacher training. So if you look at 3 and 4, the priority 3 underpins the priority 4 to flourish. So I will start with priority 4, that is the teachers, and then move on to leadership and governance, including the system leadership as the next step. Right, there are 4 elements under effective leadership and technology of teaching and learning under priority 4. The 2 that are on your slide now, and the other 2 are on there. Now, as this is the how section, I'm planning to give you some examples of what Stanmore is doing. If we take priority 4, let's look at the elements contributing to this priority. Building confidence, effective use of learning technologies, improved capacity, whole organizational approach, and so on. In Stanmore, as effective use of technology in the classroom, we are trialing mobile devices. Students' VLE is being populated with variety of resources, including those created by the teachers. Integration of our VLE with Office 365 to extend capability for anytime, any place learning. We have enabled the wireless facility. They are upgraded now to allow learners to bring their own devices, upgrade lease line for fast connections. We took the opportunity of the offer that BIS made and took the fast line connection. We are developing a central tracking and monitoring and reporting system to assess learner progress at set assessment points to ensure progress toward their individual targets to address underperformance. It is also used for quality control across all delivery. Accelerated training programs for teachers and investing in 2 full-time members of staff as learning technologists. The learning technologists support the teachers with specialist knowledge of learning resource. So what the teachers want to put on the VLE, the technologists help them to convert it into VLE level materials for the students. To deliver this priority 4 and priority 3, which is the leadership, including the system leadership, needs to be in place. They needs to be supported by the leaders and the governors. That takes me straight on to governors. I will start on the governors and then work towards the leadership. For effective leadership and governance, it needs to work within a framework. In Stanmore, we work on a corporate governance board assurance framework where we impact assess all the national policies using data analytics, data science, using big data techniques, which I have referred to as the strategic business intelligence here. We identify the critical success factors and manage the risk using a framework. Non-implementation of FELTAG recommendation will be a risk, and that was identified. So once that was done, then we needed to launch into our strategy. Then, in Stanmore, with the development all of other strategies making their contribution, we have written a 3 to 5 year digital transformation strategic plan. This takes a whole college approach. You could see there from the 3 to 5 year corporate strategy and then supported by the market strategy, information quality, manpower strategy, then the business and all other strategies which most institutions will have to drive. We contributed that in to deliver the digital transformation strategic plan. We have the first phase of the infrastructure is being implemented now to facilitate the college to introduce a new learning technologies in the classroom by 2015-16. We are going to start it in September. We have planned a 10% reduction only on our level 3 courses, teaching content, to move to digital with quality framework in place. We use Moodle as our VLE. We have enabled Office 365 and the Yammer network. Link is being trialed. It's now announced that the Microsoft is in partnership with Moodle that will advantage Stanmore, as we can use single user logins. For accountability and quality monitoring, we have a well-developed intelligence using data science. For example, if I take a level 3 student as that's our starting point at the moment, when a student walks in, they are using their GCSE scores and LAT data, we set their minimum grades for each subject or their course at 0 value added. During the year, the 4 assessment points be progress, track, and action taken. The assessment grades are arrived at from classroom work and online work. So any online work that is done on the VLE is also tracked and marked. Here I have tried to pull in some component parts of the digital transformation strategic plan. In the strategic plan, I have also addressed leadership and governance, but here I have just pulled the whole component part, or at least I've tried pulling it together. This is to show the whole college approach. The learner tracking sits at the connecting point between the student facing and the back office. You could just focus on that arrow, that's where it is. The first row of information there is all student facing for the students, and then it leads, the 3 component parts lead into learner tracking, and from that point onwards the back office takes over, the infrastructure takes over and supports and underpins that. As accountability goes, the strategy will be judged by outcome. We have set KPIs to assess that. Data information intelligence is very important tool for assessing KPI at all levels, from managers to governors. So what are the next steps? BIS released this FELTAG progress report, in which it has brought together the original FELTAG recommendation and the FE's workforce strategies, which sets out the agenda for the next 12 months. How will it work for Stanmore on the ground? The first bullet point, we need to have a digital transformation strategic plan. Second bullet point, invest in staff in the form of training, support, also invest in infrastructure to empower the teachers to create and innovate. And third, invest in staff and capital. 2 and 3, the second and the third bullet points are addressed in the digital transformation plan. As I see it, Stanmore is well on its way. Our next challenge are the qualification reforms and delivering suitable courses in the classroom. That will address through our quality strategy, part of quality to deliver curriculum fit for purpose. Our ambition is to empower the teachers to create and innovate, and the learners to accelerate their learning to deliver better outcomes. The whole college approach is aimed at removing those bricks that get in the way. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you, Urmila. That was very clear, and what I'd like to do is just take the opportunity to pick up on any questions that have been raised. So I can see we've got a couple of questions that we would like to ask, if that's okay. So Kerry, just coming back to one of your slides, I'm just going to pop back on one of your slides. Let's just pop back here. Kerry's picked up in the bottom left-hand corner, information technology redundancy. If you could give a little bit more information, Urmila, with regards to what that means, please.
Information technology redundancy is, for the very first time, the way I see it, FE sector is dependent on technology for his business critical performance. Like a bank, which is very heavily dependent on technology for their business critical, for the first time, without the technology, the college cannot deliver learning. As soon as we go on online learning, the technology becomes business critical, which means in your business continuity plan, you need to have a fallback. which means your servers will need to be saved up in cloud. You will need a second lease line for internet connection in case one fails, and so on. So it's just the backup process that needs to be done, because the students will be anytime, anywhere learning, and we can't stop that.
Lovely, thank you, Urmila. That's really helpful. Just going to pick up on a question a little bit more. One from John about what big data was used to understand the risk.
What we do is every single policy that comes out from the government, we use data to impact assess it on Stanmore. So we have data going back 10 years, so we impact assessed it by calculating what it would be if the policy was implemented in the last 10 years, and then I look to see what it may do in the future and provide come up with a risk that is associated with it, and then a reduction measure impact assessed on that. For example, accountability measure, introducing accountability measure from next year. What I have done is calculated the accountability measure as if it was introduced in the last 3 years. So I have calculated the accountability measure for the last 3 years. So next year when it comes out, it will not be a shock to me. And if it is a shock, we will make sure we have put systems in place, or for example, in accountability measure, there may be the entry criteria of a particular course might have to be raised because traditionally that particular course is performing very badly on the new measure opposed to the old measure.
Thank you, Emma. That's really helpful. And I know, talking to many of the projects on the programme, that they look at the mechanisms they have in place for horizon scanning on technology advancements, but also what you're suggesting there about the work you're doing at Stanmore is that horizon scanning on policy development and looking at, as you say, your analysis of how that would impact on your organisation, the learners that you serve. So I think that's really interesting. One of the other questions that came up is you mentioned about some of the KPIs that you use, and I wonder if you're able to share any examples of what a KPI might look like in this area of work.
Yes, for example, a KPI could be as saying that 99% of the time the lease line would be working. It could be an infrastructural KPI. I have got those as well because of the information technology redundancy and the dependability on the system. To KPIs such as learner tracking to see if we can, how many students would have not been followed up and helped if we didn't track them as they went along from their target grades. So the KPIs are spread, it's in various compartments. So I have got KPIs, for example, online materials, KPIs for VLE, each of those boxes in the transformation digital plan, I have got KPIs. Quality assurance, for example. Quality assurance is very interesting because you can't do classroom assessment anymore, or teachers being assessed to do classroom teaching. We have to have a new quality system to assess online teaching help. So the current quality system won't fit. We can't grade them based on the learners learning in the classroom or attendance and punctuality, which is normally traditionally done. We have to assess them based on the communication between the tutor and the help that the student is getting on online learning. So there will be KPI surrounding that. Each of those boxes will have a KPI.
Thank you. I think that's really helpful. And as we look at the role of governors and the process of governance, that sort of sharing of some of that information and how you get a handle on is it working and how do you know if it's working is very useful. So thank you for that, Urmila. Just going to open it up if anybody else has any other questions that they wish to ask before we thank Urmila for her input. No, I can't see any other coming up in the chat area. What I'm going to ask everyone to do is just to see if this works. So the icon at the top, what we would like to do is to give them a round of applause. So to do that, you'll need to click on the drop down arrow of the icon of the person holding their hand up, and you'll see that there is an icon of applause, and I can see that a round of applause is rippling across the webinar. So Urmila, thank you very much for your input. That was very, very helpful. So what I'd like to do now then is to move on to the second part of the webinar, which is just to put Urmila's presentation into context as well. So what I'm going to do is change these slides, and just to come back to where we were before. Okay, you should see some slides loading on your screen in a second. Okay, yeah, wonderful. So part of this CPD framework, what we want to do is just to put Urmila's input into context. So we've got a three-stage approach within this framework. The first is we've been very grateful to have Urmila's expertise to explain some of what's going on at Stanmore and how they look at leadership and governance and what they're doing and developments that they're doing. What we're then going to do is take you through the example of the resources that we've had a highly experienced researcher do some work for us. And we want to share those resources, so instead of people having to trawl through mountains of materials online, we've done that work for you. And we're going to dip into those in a second to show you the resources that are available to support this CPD module. What we then wish to do is to support organisations and individuals apply some of this back to their own organisation. And what we've put together are some examples of some activities that we are recommending that you have a look at, and you're able to pick and choose the parts of those activities that you feel will most support you and your organisation. So it's not homework, it's nothing that has to be submitted, but there's some tools that we've put together to support you take this information and start to explore this with your own organisation. What we do ask is that you share your experience and any outcomes that you have from doing so. So if you take up that offer and say, yeah, there's some resources there I want to have a look at that are going to be useful, and I'm going to have a go at some of these activities because I think that's where we are as an organisation, brilliant. What we'd ask you to do is to share that, and I'm going to take you through those steps as well before we close the webinar. So let's move on to those resources that we were talking about, and to do this I'm going to share my screen. Now then, let's have a go and do this. Here we go. Wonderful. Hopefully you're going to see my screen very shortly. And I'm just going to take us back to where we are. Okay. Oh, let me just bring this back up. So we're just going to load the Learning Futures site. And as that loads on your screen, should just take a programs doing, find out the projects that are being commissioned on behalf to governance and leadership. So I'm going to move the mouse over the CPD area, and if I click on here, then you'll see that we've been working on this fairly recently, and you'll be able to scroll through the list of the CPD modules that are there, but we're here to concentrate on the leadership and governance. So if I click on the leadership and governance module, a little bit of information with regards to the webinar, but it's the resources that we want to have a look at. And we've split these into two categories. So we've separated governance from leadership management, and if you move your governance aspect, then I'm just going to click on there, and the resources are going to show up on the right hand side of the screen. So as I say, we've had somebody who's been working brilliantly at bringing together all of the really key bits of information that we feel we can help you from the online research that's taken place. So what you'll find within here, we've tended to refer to them as buckets, where we're able to put things that are of interest. But as I start to scroll here, you'll see there's some work there, Horizon Scan for the UK government, from the Foresight Horizon Scanning Centre. So that's the first one that's showing on there, and if I click on there, then that will take me directly to the link that will come up. So it's just loading. Your screen may have gone grey for a couple of seconds whilst that loads, but you can say that that takes you directly into the report. What we will do is, when we look at the activity, the CPD activity, you'll see where we've been specific about which of these resources we feel are going to help you the most. So if you've got limited time and say, you need to know what the sort of resources that punch above the weight, the ones, then we've done that through the CPD activity. But let's just take you back to where we were. Okay. So back into our research again, just going through here, so you're familiar with the FELTAG recommendations and the reports. You can see there's the 7 stages of innovation toolkit from Nesta, a quick look at, and then we've got some models and some examples of strategies that organisations have. So the University of Nottingham have put together a strategic toolkit to help organisations develop that governance aspect of looking at learning technologies, and there's some resources there to support within the procurement of ICT equipment and services. Some further research about the effects that this has on education, and you'll see down in the bottom right hand corner here the diagram with the circles. There's a report to look at what these responsibilities are, and when we look at governance, about those issues, the vision of the organisation, the alignment of the organisation to that vision, and then the assurance of how well things are going. So there's some really practical resources online that are available for you. So second step of this CPD module is to click onto the link. We've just had a quick look there at the governance. I'm just going to go back and click on the leadership as well, so you can see reports that are available. Also looking at digital leadership, learning technology staff, and organisation structure. Please feel free to use those. That's all available free of charge. Again, if you find something in there that's useful, we'd really welcome you to share that, your experience of that, and to blog that on our site, which I'll show you in a second. But also, if you think there's some resources that are missing from there, it's obviously an ever-changing world, then by all means make a note of that as well as you do your blog online. I'm going to move us into the third stage now, and that third stage is the CPD activity. So this is specifically aimed at helping you take this information, building on Urmila's input within the webinar, the resources that have been put together, and to say, okay, let's look at how you might apply that in your organisation. And there's 2 activities that have been developed, governance and leadership. So I'll click on governance to start with. Again, just take a couple of seconds to load. You can download this file. It doesn't have to be shown on screen, so you can save this locally to your computer, and again you can distribute that to any colleagues and they're welcome to use this. But what we've done is put a series of activities together where we've made some suggestions of which parts of those research buckets might you be looking at doing something about setting the scene in terms of governance. You might be saying, okay, what we want to do is make sure our governors are aware of where we are. Then we've put some suggestions in there of how you might go about that and the resources that you might look at. The numbers that you see in the right hand side for each of those is a suggestion of typically the sort of time that it might take to do that activity. So it's just a rough indicator, but if you're looking for some quick wins, you might go for those that are slightly smaller. But ideally what you do is using this resource and picking out to say, okay, a little bit more on horizon scanning here. So activity B looks to the Foresight horizon scanning report, but it also has some links to the EdTech self-assessment tool, and you'll see in the bottom right hand corner of the screen then one of the Learning Futures projects, Gateshead Council, their NetsPass project. They've also shared some information about a digital literacy skills survey. So you'll see there's lots of really useful resources, very focused, that if you say, yep, I need to put something together here, I need some help of how we're going to do suggestions, some starters for 10. Please don't feel you need to go through every bullet point, and please don't feel that you need to do every activity, but we'd ask you to have a look at those and recommend that you have a look at those and pick out those areas that you feel are going to be most helpful to you. So that was the governance one. Let's just go back and I'll quickly show you the leadership. Very similar. See, has its own links to different parts of the leadership research that's been undertaken. So the NMC, if I can say it, Horizon Report, that's there. The Future of Learning, Preparing for Change, there's an EU research report that's presented there. And again, just as we scroll through, so here's an example, activity C, looking at making predictions. So you can listen to a quick podcast, about 4 minutes, what they think the predictions are for 2015. And our recommendation is you might have a go at doing that yourselves as well for your organisation and start to share that with your governors and leaders and managers. You'll see activity D. Again, this has come from one of the Learning Futures programs. So college has kindly shared some slides where one of their staff has put together a summary for governors, and they use this in one of their governors meetings to help raise an understanding of what learning and innovation or learning technologies is about, where their college is, and what the challenges that they face. So again, by all means, these are resources available to you. Use them as you will, and what we'd ask you to do is to share your experience and any outcomes. So to do that, I'm just going to take you back onto and you'll see here on the home page, if you scroll down the home page, you'll see a number of blogs will show on the screen. So either the research blogs from the projects or some of the posts will show down on the right hand side of the screen as well. When you register on the site, once you're signed up, top right hand corner, you can then sign in, and when you click on this is asking me just to sign in. Hopefully my password is showing, so I'm just going to sign in. There we go. And what you'll be able to see is that you're able to enter a blog as well. So if you use any of the resources, if you have comments or questions with regards to Urmila's input within the webinar, and if you use any of the CPD activities or any part of them, what we'd ask you to do is just to share your experience. So if it's been something that's been useful, how's it been useful, what have you done with it? If there's something that you've taken it and done something totally different with, wonderful, please do just share your responses on there, and it's all part of that community of practice that we're developing as part of the program as well. So I'm just now going to finish off the webinar by taking you back to the slides. Just bring those up. Whilst I'm doing that, I'm just checking the chat area. Jamie, I can see that you're asking where you can get Urmila's PowerPoint. That will be part of the recording for the webinar as well. we put links on the CPD module page for governance that you'll be able to use those. So anybody that couldn't attend this session, they'll be able to access those materials from going into the governance side of those CPD modules. So just to confirm, this is one of the CPD frameworks. You can see there's a whole range of different areas, including instructional design, assistive technology, online badging. We've got some equally good speakers as we've had today who are very kindly sharing their thoughts and their approaches from the organisation that they represent. So we hope that you found that webinar useful. We'd like to thank you for your time and for joining us today. The recording will be available on the site under the governance area, but if anybody has any questions, you're welcome to type them now. But otherwise, I'd just like to say thank you very much. Hope you found that useful. Please do sign up for the Learning Futures website if you haven't done that already, and if you have, then please do blog and share how you feel the content, the research and the CPD activities are helping you in your organisation, or any questions that you have. Okay, there's no final questions that I can see in the chat area. Jenny, thank you for your comments there. As I say, I hope that's useful, but can I just hope that you wish you a good afternoon, whatever you've got planned for the rest of today, and we look forward to hearing how you've used these resources and what they've done for you and your organisation. So thank you ever so much on behalf of the Learning Futures programme. If you're attending a webinar in the future, then we look forward to seeing you there. So thank you very much, and once again, thanks to Urmila.